For several years, Bashar Kirma has been facilitating a youth-driven spiritual formation group called Silent Saints. They're not scholars, but average people tackling some of life's most complex questions. It's a call to rise above anger, depression, uncertainty, and negativity in life. It's a call to find genuine peace and happiness. It's a call to change the world. Here is Silent Saints.
Welcome to the Silent Saint Show. In the last episode, we discussed what is the purpose of life. And we determined, based on the evidence, that the purpose of life is happiness. We as human beings need happiness. In fact, we need it so much that we look for so many sources of happiness. We were able to divide our sources into two categories. Those categories were based on the tangible and intangible evidence of what makes up a human being, and that is of body and of soul. Based on that, those categories that we determined are sources that make the body happy and sources that make the soul happy. We were able to determine also that based on the evidence around us, the majority of the sources that we turn to for happiness are sources that end, sources that are limited. They have an ending. And so we raise the question, are there sources that don't have an end? You were left with an intellectual workout. You were asked the question, or the questions, if there was a source that does not end, a source for happiness that is unlimited, how far would you go to get it? Would you want it? We tied that source to God. And so the question we raise today, does God exist? From the last episode, we said that's not the hard question. Join us and we'll see what those questions are. Welcome again, and thank you for joining us on this episode of the Silent Saints. As mentioned earlier, we are discussing the unlimited source of happiness. And as mentioned, that unlimited source could possibly be God. So what we're going to discuss today is the question of, does God exist? Today we have with us Justine, Jacob, Nikki, Alven, and Brigette. And of course, you along with us, and I'm Bashar. So guys, before the episode, you had the chance of asking a bunch of people, different people all around, the question of, does God exist? And why? Why do people believe that God exists? What answers did you get?
Well, I was talking to a couple of friends of mine, and they both actually believe God exists. They believe that because they see the miracles that go on in the world and they feel their prayers being answered.
Okay. Jacob?
Well, a lot of people that I've spoke to, you had some that said that God doesn't exist, but quite a few people said that he does exist. And the way they see it is through nature, a lot of stuff that happened in their life that could not be explained, through just natural means. So they said they have to be a God,
I basically got some more answers. God does exist, and they see it through nature and science and unexplainable things, that occur every day, things that can't be explained by science, you know what I mean? Like, and actually quoting someone, they said, science is nothing without a God. So. how they
Okay,
saw it.
okay.
Yeah.
Going off of what Jacob and Nikki said, I've had some people tell me that, science can only prove so much. And when it comes to, the creation of the universe and creation of everything and creation of us, it only brings us theories and what they think could have happened, what somebody thinks happened, or, what didn't happen. But when it comes to God, I have a reason to believe that God does exist. For one thing, just some miracles I see, around. You can go online, on anywhere, Google it, any website, and just look up miracles. There's just some things that science can explain, just like what Nikki and Jacob were saying.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, it's very strange to hear these words, maybe, the word miracle or science or unexplainable. So we're going to see today how that all ties in. Brigette, what'd you hear?
Well, I asked a few of my friends, and they said that they did believe for the most part, they did believe because of miracles they've seen themselves, because of nature, and one of my friends actually said that she was torn. She didn't know. She said yes because of nature and because of all the beautiful views in the world, and she said no because she said she doesn't feel him. Like she said it's a feeling that she can't explain, but she just can't feel him. So
It's very interesting. I also did the same thing. I asked a bunch of people if they think God exists, and I heard a lot of people actually say to me, "I don't know. I don't know." When I would ask, some people would say yes, and some people would say no. But those who did say yes, I would say, "How do you know?" And we'd reach a conclusion that they really don't know. It's more, as many of them told me, it's just based on faith. That's what I believe, and that's what I grew up with, and that's what I've learned throughout the time.
They believe. A lot of people say they believe something's out there, but they don't always. They don't want to put a name to it, like God. They say it's something, the universe, something that's out there that's controlling something. A lot of people. That's what the couple of the answers that I get from people. So
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like a feeling that I feel there's something out there. That's true. So obviously today, I mean, can we really base our life on feelings? I don't know. Could we base these things on feelings? What do you guys think?
I don't think
Okay.
so. It's hard to believe something when you don't see it, and I think that's what a lot of people feel, and sometimes even me, sometimes it's hard for me because when I don't see something in front of me, it's so hard for me to believe it. I feel like I need to know it to believe it.
Sure. And as we're talking, this also goes for you who's watching today. Ask yourself the question before we go into the real explanation or more reasoning on the existence of God. How do you know? Do you know that God exists? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but how do you know? As we continue. I love when I talked to my grandmother, I asked her, I said, Nana, do you believe God exists? And she looked at me, she goes, why you don't? And I said, no, I can I say I don't? And she picked up, her sandal. It's one of those situations where it's literally, she believes by faith. I said, so then of course I said, oh, no, Nana, I do, but how do you know? She goes, why are you asking me? How do you know? I just know. That's it.
that's like innate in them.
That's it. There's no argument there. Of course, God bless her. She's in her 90s, and maybe she's never picked up a book to read, and let alone know how to read. But God bless her. When it comes to God, that's it. That's how it is, and that's how it was. For us, I think it's a little bit different. We do face a lot of questions and a lot of doubting questions. Even in some cases, it's good. Because it's good for us to know whether God does exist. Do we have really solid proof that we can fall back on to say, you know what, as things go wrong or as things go right, is there a God? And that's what we're going to look into. But before that, let's look at more of a hypothetical situations. Okay, let's say God doesn't exist. Let's say God does not exist. What are the advantages of saying God does not exist?
I have a good one. You don't have to listen to your conscience. Like, I think your conscience is given by God. It is given by God. So you don't really have to listen to it and you don't feel bad. So
I really feel like without a God, if God didn't exist, a lot of our conscience is formed throughout our life when we start to learn about God and understand who He is. So we start to feel like there's consequences, for the things that we do because there's a God, But if there was no God, you wouldn't really have to care about all that. You could live freely, do whatever you want, and nothing to follow. Nothing to destroy you, nothing to hurt you.
You don't feel guilty
You don't
about
feel
the
guilty.
things you do. You don't have any sort of shame, like you don't have, like my morals and the way that I've become, I base it off of, my faith. A lot of it is based off my faith. So without a God, without faith, I wouldn't have those morals. I wouldn't have, these guidelines for my life and those, and that's where I feel guilt. When I step out of my bounds. So I wouldn't have that without a God.
Okay. So, Alven, what do you think? What about you? From the people you talk to or from personal experiences, what are the advantages of not having a God or saying that God doesn't exist?
From personal experience, I've had a lot of conversations with people who would argue that religion starts wars, and maybe with no religion there wouldn't be no war. Even though most of the wars that we've had recently aren't really based on religion, maybe small civil wars could be based on religion, but some people would argue that people would stop fighting over which God does exist, or who the God is, or which God is right or which God is wrong, and because nowadays we've got so many different gods and prophets, and but there's only one Jesus Christ, and we know the truth, or we'll at least hopefully find out if that is the truth.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Alven when it comes to like wars, because a lot of times religion is what starts a lot of problems in this world, and I mean that's a big thing that we've seen for all throughout history. It's always been religion, and even people in this country who want to get married. It's hard because when someone believes in something and someone believes in something else, your morals are different, and it starts a lot of problems. And from there, it grows and it grows. And from people that I talk to, they think, well, without religion or without a God, the advantage would be, everybody would do whatever they want. Everyone would live freely. There wouldn't be no worry for punishment. And a lot of people have like a big conscience, as you guys spoke about. So.
Absolutely.
That's true. Okay, so let's keep that question. What if God doesn't exist? What would be disadvantages of that? What do you guys think?
Not having someone to fall back on. Oh wait, you said disadvantages.
Disadvantages. A disadvantage
Explain,
of not having a God. So let's say we say God doesn't exist. Is there a disadvantage?
I believe I believe like they say freedom. A lot of people use the word freedom, where they live freely, do whatever they want. I believe that's chaos, because without any type of order, without any type of consequence or rule or something that's put in place for us to guidance, everywhere you look will be chaos, because people won't know what to do. Nothing will be built, nothing will be explored, nothing will it just without a God there just won't be anything. That's how I feel. So.
Okay.
Going off of what Jacob said, he's absolutely right. Without the existence of God, a big disadvantage would be just people doing whatever they want, but it wouldn't really be wrong, because nobody was there to set the guidelines and set the rules of, what's necessarily wrong or right. There would come about laws and rules and, such things like that.
Which we have in place.
Which we do have in place. But now some laws and rules that we have allow murder of a fetus. Now, are those good rules that we're going by? Are those bad rules? Nevertheless, without having those set of, main guideline rules, how would they know what to base their rules off of? It'd just be chaos, just like Jacob said.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Justine.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. And I also think, a big disadvantage is sometimes people don't have anyone to go to. And I mean, when you don't have a God, or you don't have that source or that hope, for salvation. It's like, what are you living your life for? I mean, what is there to look forward to? Or, I mean, who's your backbone? Who are you going to go to when, you have a problem? How are you going to meditate? And, I think it really, a big disadvantage is, the world really will be out of order. Of course there'll be rules, be put in place, but when there's no God, it's
Whose rules?
yeah.
Whose rules?
Who starts them, who decides them, so.
Okay. Okay. That's
Going
fair.
off what Justine said, it was going to be almost identical. For me, the person or where I go to when something happens is God. All my struggles in every aspect of my life and every worry, I turn to Him. So, and He helps me through it. That's every bad situation turns into something beautiful, whether it's at that moment or later. I know that He's guiding my life, and without that guidance, I don't know where my life would have went. So that's one of the biggest disadvantages to me is where would my life have gone?
Okay.
Who would I be without a God?
Okay. Okay. That's fair. Bridget?
I think
Anything to
people,
add?
sorry.
Yeah.
I think people seem to forget that our God, like, He loves us. Everything that He does for love. So, like, He sent His Son here. His Son died for us. I think that it's very selfish of us if we just want to do whatever we want to do. Or, why would people, like, do what they want, Like, it's okay to have, yeah, like, it's fun, but it's not, like, again, like, it's hurting your soul. Like, you're happy now, but your soul is being hurt,
So you're relating it back to what we talked about in the last episode, the purpose of life.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Okay. One thing I from talking to people, a huge disadvantage people have told me is then there won't be eternal life.
Yes.
And I'm like, whoa, hold on. I think that's a fair argument from that aspect. All right, so now let's say God does exist. Okay, what would be an advantage of that?
Eternal life.
Eternal life.
That's the first thing.
Yeah,
That's the first thing
fair.
that pops in my mind.
That's fair.
You have someone to fall back on. I was speaking to my brother, and he told me that he goes, when no one's around, I have someone to talk to. But it was funny. He was like, I got someone to talk to, and I don't feel stupid about it. It's like because there's a God. You're talking to somebody. But most of the times the advantage is you have someone to fall back on. Bottom line, every time you feel down, you got someone to fall back on. Your backbone, something that gives you strength when you're weak. Something that gives you courage when you're afraid of something. There's a God. You know that someone's out there watching you, even if you don't feel it. At times.
How about you, Nikki? What do you think?
For me, I think that, with everyone's answers with disadvantages, they said no worries. Like advantage of not having a God is, I'm worry free. With a God, for me, I'm worry free. I put all my trust in Him, all my worries with Him, and He takes care of me. So, and that's actually quite ironic. I'm worry free with a God, and I'd probably be more worried without one because I'd have to take all the problems that I have and keep them on myself, and that to me is terrifying. I'm blessed to have a God that takes care of my problems. So.
Okay. So let's add one more to that, and let's say, what are the disadvantages of saying God does exist? Think about that
again,
as a twist.
Again, it comes down to the rules. There people are gonna be like, oh, there's rules. There's things that we can't do anymore because there's consequences. There's a hell. Who's gonna want to burn in fire? For doing something wrong. But every little, with a God, every little thing might be wrong to them. But that's a misunderstanding of a God. Personally, to me, that's a misunderstanding of a God. But when people look at a God, that's most of the stuff that comes to their mind. So.
Wouldn't you look at it as if it were like a diet, a lifestyle? Like, it's not
right.
It's not something that, there's this girl that I work with, you guys. She is unbelievably fit. She's I'm like, don't you ever get tired of this? She's like, no. She's like, I can't, this is, it's my fuel. It makes me feel good. That's how I think of, that's how I feel with my faith. If I don't have Him, I don't have anything. you know?
Absolutely.
So same
Amen.
thing, like with eating habits. Same, I mean, it's for your future.
We're about to eat
It's not-
pizza. What are you talking
I
about?
know.
I heard, I actually heard somebody tell me if we were to say God does exist, and if the whole world was to say God does exist, half the TV that we watch couldn't sustain itself.
Right.
You know, that would be a huge disadvantage. That I can't watch half the TV I watch because you know it goes against what God says or what God tells us to do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to see if there are scientific evidence or if there are hardcore evidence for the existence of God. And while we're doing that, take the time to wrestle with the thoughts that we have been discussing, advantages and disadvantages for the existence or for the non-existence of God as we have been doing. We'll see you shortly. Welcome back. Before the break, we were looking at the advantages and disadvantages of the existence or non-existence of God. As mentioned earlier, we are still in search of the unlimited source for happiness, which relates us back to the purpose of life. Okay, so what we were doing when we're talking advantages and disadvantages of the existence or non-existence of God, what we're actually discussing, this is it's a wager, a mathematically known wager called Pascal's wager. I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are thinking, why are there dominoes pieces on the table? All right, we'll get to that. You can ignore the dominoes pieces at the moment.
I thought we were about to play something.
Maybe we'll do that after. But going back to the advantages and disadvantages of the existence or non-existence of God, it's actually a wager. Are you guys familiar with Pascal's wager?
Yeah,
What do you guys think?
Familiar.
Can somebody give me a summary?
I can.
Hey, Nikki.
Okay, so basically, the diagram at least looks like this. It's 4 squares, and it's a probability. So it's the probability of whether or not God exists or does exist, and the consequences of like does he exist and does he not exist.
Right.
So you'll have like if he does exist, you know, is there like a consequence, and if he does not exist, then what are the consequences of that? You know.
So basically, what we looked at earlier, if he exists, what are advantages? If he doesn't exist, what are advantages, and so on.
Disadvantages.
Exactly. Pascal's wager goes something like this. So let's say God exists, and you believe in him or follow what he does. Believing in this case, not just intellectual knowledge of the existence of God, but actually following what God says. And so if God does exist, and you believe in him and do what he says, what happens is you get to gain happiness in this life, and since he exists, there's an afterlife. You get to gain happiness in that life. Mm-hmm. And let's say he does exist. The second part of the statistics. Let's say he does exist. He does exist, and you don't believe in him. Then what happens is you get to not to live a happy life according to following his rules, and you will lose out on the afterlife. So it's a lose-lose versus the first situation is a win-win. Mm-hmm. Now, if he doesn't exist and you follow him, the wager would say you get to live a happy life now, but you don't have to worry about the afterlife because there is no afterlife. But if he doesn't exist and you don't follow him, what happens is you get to live a kind of a not so happy life here, and it doesn't matter in the end anyway because there is no afterlife. So Pascal's wager says the highest probability of good, or the best profitable probability, is believing in God and following what he does, just in case he does exist. So the big question then comes to you guys and also to you. Should we place our belief in God on a wager? Should we believe, let's say we believe in God based on Pascal's wager, should we believe in God just based on a bet?
I mean, logically, it makes sense. I feel like it's evidence more than placing my whole belief on a wager. Do you know what I mean? It gives me like a set of like, okay, well, not only like religiously, but, you know, philosophically, there are, you know, so many different dimensions as to like proving that God, you know, believing in God is beneficial. So to me, this is like, it helps, but it's not, I would never put my whole faith into a wager or a bet on whether or not God exists. I would never put it on a probability. I'd have to have substantial evidence, to base my beliefs. That's what I'm going to live my life by,
For me,
So.
I honestly, I believe through my, through my learning and understanding of who God is, what God is, and learning about my faith, But at the same time, I look at it in that sense where, yeah, you don't put a wager on God, but you look at him as a way where, okay, if he does exist, you live a good, and you follow him, you live a good life. I mean, if he doesn't exist, but you still follow him, what do you got to lose? So you live a great life anyway. So I mean, that's the way I look at it sometimes. So
So you're okay with the wager?
yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, Jacob. I think, what does it hurt? I mean, you might as well follow the rules. I mean, they're not bad rules. They're good rules to live a good life. They're good morals. I mean, whether you believe in God or not, there's still good guidelines to live your life by, to live a good life and to be a better person and, to influence people in a good way. And I just think, what do you have to lose? Why not? You might as well win. It's a win-win situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, but to bet your whole life on a wager, to me that's silly. I would rather have substantial evidence than just base my beliefs on, it's a good probability for me to believe in God. I think that this is a step up. Yeah, it gives evidence as to it's better to live a good life. Everyone knows that it's better to live a good life. Even people who don't believe in a God know that it's good to live a good life, to be a good person. Everyone wants to be a good person. We all have good in us and we all have bad in us. But I would never base my whole entire life on a wager. I just don't think that makes sense. I would base it on evidence.
Now, for me, if I was to start my faith from Pascal's wager and say, well, if he does exist and I do believe in him, that's a plus for me. If I do believe in him and he doesn't exist, I mean, I'm not really losing anything, just like Justine said, and also similar to going off what Jacob said. But what I'm getting at is, just because I started my faith maybe from that point, I would still look for evidence. I wouldn't just stop and say, he does exist, and I do follow him, that's a plus. Or if I do follow him, he doesn't exist, I'm not losing anything.
you're gonna have to ask why then.
I'm not just gonna stop there. I mean, I'm still gonna look for evidence.
Process.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
You want to ask why.
Growing.
You want to grow in that.
You're gonna look for different evidence. So it's not just gonna stop there and be the end.
Bridget, what would you do?
Well, I think.
By the way, I think we have 2 and 2. Some people would be like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I'm kind of like I'm both a little because I like that you still live a good Christian life either way. Even if it's for if it's with somebody that's on the fence about the faith, it's good. They're still living a good life. They're still being a good neighbor to somebody. And with myself, if I can't live my life on a bet. I can't. I have to know. I have to know, and thank God, we know the truth, and I just can't live my life feeling am I going to make it? Am I not going to make it? Is there a God? Isn't there a God? I can't do that.
It takes away from the relationship. In a sense.
Definitely does, and you miss out on a great relationship. So
I see. Yeah.
100%.
So what do you guys think?
No.
Is there a God?
Yeah.
absolutely.
There is.
How do you know?
I mean, I look at all you guys. I'm like, how am I here?
You're so cute.
All right, let's go into a little bit more. It's good to have Pascal's wager. It's good to have the different philosophical approaches. The big question on the floor is, are there scientific evidence for the existence of God? And the answer is...
Yes.
Yes.
Wow, okay. Yeah. That's
Now,
short.
is there scientific evidence for the existence of God, or is there scientific evidence that can lead to the existence of a God?
Ah, very good. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay down the evidence, and then we're going to go from there. And we can make that decision, and you can make that decision. Basically, it goes something like this. What we have understood, actually, if you look more in the philosophy realm of things, they've always said if there is a painting, then there's a painter. There's the philosophical side of things. If we look at, if there's a creation, then there has to be a creator. We look at the cosmos. We look at all around us, the trees, the physical things that we can touch and feel. Somebody would ask the question, how did that get there? But at that time, we were limited in technology. We were limited in knowledge. What we have today, especially when we study the cosmos, when we look at the cosmological way of things, what we understand is through science, there are things that are beyond doubt. There are things that are based on formulas. So, for example, we look at something called entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder. Okay? What we know from science is things go from order to disorder. And we can measure that amount of disorder based on entropy. So we'll take a look at this example for the dominoes example. Everything looks like it's in order. How long, if we were to stay here long enough, what do you think would happen to those dominoes pieces?
Fall down.
They would fall down, right? It goes from order to disorder. They look relatively in an order place. So therefore, it could lead us to see that they were going to disorder. The other realization also based on science, we look at Newton's law. Newton's law says an object in motion remains in motion unless an external force is acted upon it. Likewise, an object at rest remains at rest unless an external force is acted upon it. So, are those pieces at rest or in motion?
At rest.
At rest. Is there any way that can deny those pieces are at rest?
No.
I don't think so. What is the only way, according to Newton's law, for those pieces to be in motion?
Someone to push
External
it.
force acts upon it.
An external force has to act upon it. So when the scientists that have studied the cosmos, okay, they have realized that we have an expanding universe. Our universe is actually through movement. And what they have determined through different ways, one of the ways, for example, that through spectroscopy. And spectroscopy is a way to measure through wavelength. Let's say that you see an object in space, and you measure it through a wavelength. Now, the wavelength, the way the line would go, goes from red to violet. So infrared is closer to the red, which is basically a less radiating light, versus an ultraviolet, and that's why ultraviolet rays can actually hurt us. So when they look at an object and it's moving more toward the red, it means it's moving away. And that's what scientists have studied. They have studied that we have an expanding universe. So we have a universe that's moving. Well, if it's expanding and it's moving, based on the expansion or the inflation of the universe, based on that, they have concluded mathematically and scientifically, if something is expanding, it means it would start from an origin. In fact, it has to start from an origin. And if it started from an origin, that origin was not moving. What does Newton's law say? If something is not moving and then it goes to moving, what do we have? What's the only way for that to happen?
External force.
An external force has to act upon it. Some have claimed this theory to be the Big Bang theory. But what they have done, actually they've gone into further, and it's no longer just in a form or a realm of a theory. In fact, in 2003, a paper was put out by Board, by Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin. And it's a mathematical theorem that has taken the cosmos into the realization that there is no way around but having an original point. And that now ties in with the Newton's theory, or Newton's law, saying if everything started from an original point, that point was at rest, it has to remain at rest. But the reality is, it's not at rest right now, is it? It's not. So an external force has to act upon it. And therefore, that external force, science demands a necessity for that external force. It's not just an external force. It has to be a pretty massive, capable force in order to go from still to expanding universe or to a moving universe in the capacity that the universe is. And that external force we identify as
God.
As God. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
Do you guys see the scientific evidence behind this? All right. So something here is very important. We have if we were to wrap it up in short, based on the evidence around us in the cosmos, we have an expanding universe. That expanding universe started from a single point. That single point couldn't go into expansion without an external force, based on Newton's law and based on everything else that scientists have found around us. Therefore, again, we're going to say it this way. Science demands a necessity for the existence of a higher, transcendent, powerful form that can cause this to happen. Do you guys see that? So it'd be very similar to this. And actually, it'll take us right into the next topic, which is kind of, or the next proof, but it's kind of a not as strong or as solid, we'll say, as the scientific evidence based on that, based on what we were just mentioning. But it kind of builds on that. The fact that we said everything goes based on entropy, it goes from order to disorder, right? Let's see. Shall we try it?
Let's try it.
All right. Order. Disorder. Isn't that true?
That's true.
There is something very interesting though. It's actually called the design argument. Because from the disorder that we have measured, we have order in our solar system which provides life. That is huge. Because we know there's a necessity for an external force, which we call God. But now, order to disorder, but and then you find order, disorder, but then you have us. You have intelligent creatures. So what the conclusion would be, or the deductive reasoning would be, that external force that we were talking about, not only is it powerful, but it's also very intelligent. That it allows everything to happen with the necessity for, or the allowable environment for life to take place. What do you guys think? Is that too much to take in?
No.
It's a lot, yeah.
Not
It's
yet,
a lot
at
to
least.
take in.
That's understandable.
So we'll take a break, and when we come back, we're going to ask you during this time to digest the evidence that's presented before you. And then when we come back, we will look at even further on what it means to have these evidence and what it means for all of us here, including you, to know maybe that, no more maybe, to know that God does exist. Welcome back. Before the break, we had looked at the scientific and mathematical evidence for the existence of God. Actually, we had looked at the scientific necessity for the existence of God. So now let's take it internal a little bit. Have you or someone you know did not believe in the existence of God, did not believe God existed? And what was their reasoning?
Well, I have a friend that's 23. Well, she's 24 now, but when she was 23, she had a stroke. And she was one of the people I asked, like, did you, do you believe in the existence of God? And she said yes and no. So, I mean, I'm still happy that she said yes, like she's 50-50, but she said no because she said she just didn't feel him. And to go deeper, it's because she's like, why? Like, why me? You know, I think a lot of people ask themselves, why me? But I mean,
It's a good point.
Yeah,
it's a good point.
The biggest question I get is like, if there's a God, like why does evil, why is there evil? Why do bad things happen to good people? That's the biggest question. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen in general? And I mean, that's probably the most widespread question that I've gotten.
Yeah, it's just on that really quick. I always come across people who would ask me that question when we talk about the existence of God, and I would show them the scientific proofs and things like that. And they would ask, well, if there is an all-knowing and all-good and all-powerful God, why would he create things? Why would he create evil?
Why are starving kids in Africa? why are starving this? Why, you know, they're always asking about the genocide, killing, and, you know, like she said, evil.
Rapists.
Why are these things? Why is he letting this happen?
Like, where is God when all this is happening?
Yeah.
Right. And actually, we're going to look at this not from a feeling. I mean, we should answer this. So this is something very serious and very, you know, very important to look at. But we're going to look at this not from an emotional side. We should, and at some point in time we will. In the future, in future shows, we certainly would go into the personalized version of this. But from a purely mathematical, purely scientific, or purely even philosophical way of looking at this, it's almost illogical. We're going to describe how that is, but it's almost illogical to say, because there is evil in the world, and because God is all good and all knowing and all powerful, and since there is the evidence say there is evil in the world, that means God doesn't exist. It actually doesn't go that way. It's not a proof for the non-existence of God. The burden of proof would fall on a person saying this, because what we do know, and we're going to bring a big word in here, what we do know is there's something called free will. And we all have free will. If we didn't have free will, it would be very easy to say, then God created us to love Him, or God created us to do good only, or God created us to not do any evil, or to be programmed,
to be like a robot.
To be like a robot, programmed, exactly.
Someone told me free will doesn't exist.
I love this, and I did hear this one time, and I said, okay, so you don't have free will. I asked the person, that said, there is no free will. I said, okay, you don't have free will. And the person said, no, I don't. I said, all right, do you love God? And the person said, no. I said, okay, based on
That's free will.
Based on that answer.
But if you didn't have free will, you would have to say yes. And so, there's a logical reasoning here. So the actual thing that we have to look at, based on the evidence around us, and based on what we know from the further evidence that, in fact, we will look at in the next episodes, is that God tells us, or God has showed us, that this life contains the imperfections. But there is a life to come that contains the perfections. And that's the one we are to seek. However, that mixed with free will, just to go back, let's leave the theological side a little bit, the burden of proof falls on the person saying this, that's saying that God does not exist because there is evil in the world. The reality is, show me a world, show me a mathematical model, show me a scientific model, show me even a philosophical model of having free will and no evil. It does not exist. The fact and the reality is, because there is free will, because we have this free will, there has to be a mathematical chance, even if you want to call it that, a statistical basis for evil, because we have choices. With free will comes choices.
It's like
and
with
not
the
everyone's
positive
going to do.
negative.
Not everybody's going to choose the positive. Otherwise, this would be a very simple situation. So, in actuality, it's a very good argument to say this, and it's a terrible thing. And I've heard it many times. Again, when it's personal, why did this happen to me? Why did God let this happen to me? That we will look into further down in other episodes, and we will look into that into more detail. But just from strictly a knowledge basis, the burden of proof does fall on a person saying God doesn't exist. The reality is, we know based on the evidence God does exist, and we also know based on the evidence is that there is evil in the world. And so there has to be a common ground in this, and the reality that we know is that free will kind of plays into it. This question we will go again into more detail later. Any other experiences? How about personal experiences? Did you guys always believe in God?
I was afraid of him.
You were afraid of God?
I was afraid of getting too close. I don't know why. I just felt like I couldn't go to church because I was too bad, or I don't know. I was just scared. So I stayed away, and for a long time I stayed away from him.
For me personally, there are times, I won't lie to you, that I don't believe in a God. Not necessarily don't believe in a God, but is there a God? I could see there's a Christ, but is there a God? You know what I'm saying? It kind of rings in my head all the time. Like if something happens to me, or I fall, or I get hurt, I always try to not think that way, but I question him in a sense. It's fine to be frustrated with God. Someone told me that it's fine to be frustrated with God, to tell your problems to God. Just don't not believe in him. You know what I'm saying? That's what I've gotten throughout my life. But there are times where I don't believe in him, and you know, but I do come back to reality in a sense. So
I could honestly say that maybe my whole life I did believe in God. Maybe because that's just how I was raised. But I could honestly say that in the back of my mind, I never thought about him. I never talked about him. I never, I never really acted like there really was a God. You know, and until like, I got a little bit older. You know, now I'm in my 20s, and once you start hitting struggles and you really need help with something, and once you realize, like, you know what, my prayer did get answered, and it's like you could almost just feel that there is a God. You could feel like the grace of God, the grace that He's given us, and just you can almost feel Him forgiving you. You can almost feel Him like dying on the cross for you, and it's like once you just allow Him to come in you, you can like
come into your life.
Honestly,
right?
Yeah,
it's a growth. I mean, like you start growing in God. In a sense.
You're right. This is something that I think it's a little bit maybe easier on us because we've experienced this and we've gone through these things.
Not many people,
Right. The question, and I'll throw this at you guys. Obviously, all of us sitting here, I personally, let me take it a little bit back. I personally, at some point in time, did not believe God exists. I chose to believe God didn't exist. And so, but again, I didn't have all the knowledge. I had not done all the research. And I remember at some point in time, and I love this, people would ask me, how were you during that time? Were you moral? I'm like, yeah, you could be moral to a certain degree. You could follow the rules, even though you're walking around knowing, personally, I strongly believe that God didn't exist. And why not? We have rules all around us. The do not kill, do not steal. We have all these things. We have laws against these things. So it was easy for me to live a so-called moral life, even though walking around without the belief in God. But then at some point in time, I remember the question started to come about, well, why don't you believe in God? But does God exist? And then I remember the different people, of course, I always get attacked. Whenever that happens, the attacks started to happen. You have to believe in God or you're going to hell. I'm like, oh, that's great. That's bringing me to God. Thank you. I appreciate it now. Now I'm getting closer. Yay. But so then, but then I did go on the research and I wanted to know for myself. So with that, all of us have gone to certain degrees to find out whether God exists or not. And let me ask you this question, and you can tell the viewer, how has God changed your life? Knowing God, how has that changed your life? What would you tell the viewer based on the evidence that's been presented, based on what you know from your personal experiences? Tell the viewer what they can do or how they can get closer to God.
Personally, my life has done a 180 with God. I know where I was about a year ago, and I know where I am now. And if I had not turned to Him when I did, and if I didn't, give Him my trust and give Him all my worries and put my faith in Him, my life would have taken a completely different route. And I am 1,000% happier. Going back to the purpose of life, I wasn't there, but they said that you're looking for happiness, and my happiness is with Him. So if I can tell anybody anything, it's if I found happiness with Him, I'm pretty sure that anyone probably can. So turn to Him in times of hardship, and He'll take the bad and turn it into beautiful always.
Okay, Jacob.
I don't know. As I was growing up, I really didn't have I had a sense of God and a sense of relationship with God, through my family, through my upbringing. But eventually, once I started to learn about God, once I started to get closer to Him, I got a certain zeal. I'm more of a passionate person now. When I speak of His name, when I touch someone, they're so much more touched when I speak of Jesus Christ in their life. When I speak of God, the way I became stronger is through helping other people through Christ, through God. And that's when I saw the smile and the happiness on their face that somebody is there to protect them and to help them. And that brought me joy. And without God, honestly, I would 100% be probably going crazy in the club scenes, and nothing wrong with that. But I would be going crazy in the club scenes, women, doing this, doing that. It brought a lot of order to my life. And through that, it brought me more happiness and more gratefulness for Christ.
Alvin, how about you?
Me personally, you could say that I'm a God-fearing man, but not in the sense of, he'll like whack me if I do something wrong. More in the sense of like, I don't want to, if there is a God, I wouldn't want to miss out on what he has to offer, in this life or the after. The way I look at it is, back in the day before, maybe about a year and a half ago, we have laws, but I wasn't following them. I mean, the biggest one I break almost every day is, speeding. There's a speed limit right there. If I follow the speed limit, are they gonna like reward me with anything? If I law says don't kill, don't murder. If I don't murder somebody, who is someone gonna reward me with something? There's all these laws that you could only get in trouble from them. You can't, nothing good comes out of them. Of course, good does come out of them because, less murder, less accident, stuff like in that sense. But now, I look at, the Bible and, I read in the Ten Commandments, it says, very similar to all of our laws that we have now. Don't murder, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't commit adultery. But then it says, like, we could get rewarded for following these, and it's like, laws that we have, in the States, in the world, laws of the land, they don't reward you for not for following the laws, but God does.
So I gotta ask you now, when was the last time God sent you a check for following?
No, he
All right, we'll leave that alone. We'll leave that alone.
Well,
Brigette,
my turn. From my personal experience, I've gained a best friend that will never let me down. And I'm less before. I was a very worried person. I would put a lot on my shoulders and more than I can handle. But with Christ, I can handle anything. I'm happier. I'm a much happier person. So my advice to anybody is just give him a chance, and he'll do wonders for you. So.
That's fair. Thank you.
I agree with Brigette. I think, once you really get to know him, you can find a source of happiness, and it's not just, a 1 second source. It's eternal. And my advice to you is, give him a chance, get to know him, read about him, research him, open up a Bible and, get to see what's out there, research everything else out there and kind of see, where you fall into it.
That's fair. It's actually amazing that we have been mentioning Jesus, we have mentioned Christ and these big names that we are saying right now. On my personal experience, I have noticed going from a time where to not believe in God to times that I do, the smile on my face is just huge. Just the internal peace and internal happiness. The difference is just tremendous, and that's what I would tell you. Just give that a chance when we're talking about the purpose of life in particular. That being said, a lot of evidence has been presented before you. You may know somebody, it may not always necessarily be for you, but you may know somebody who is going through this, maybe a family member who doesn't believe in God. The biggest thing that I think we've all noticed is that the one thing that God speaks of is love. And so what we throw that onto you is use love, understand what love is, but use love, show this person love. I hate it when somebody would come to me and says, "You're going to hell for not believing in God." That's what your God says. Where's the love in that? Where's the good news in that? So share that love with others. Bring that love to others. Where we go from here is this. now with this evidence presented, the choice is yours. You have enough evidence, you can do a quick search on the internet, do a search engine search on the internet, and you'd see the evidence behind, or the proofs behind, even as presented earlier. The one thing to take from here, and we're going to give you, as always, an intellectual workout to do. And that workout for you is this. You're going to take 5 to 10 minutes each day and look at these evidence that were presented here today and think about them and make the choice. Don't be afraid to make the choice, either or. Don't be afraid to make the choice either or. God does exist or God doesn't exist. We know from the evidence the necessity for the existence of God, but you may choose to believe that God doesn't exist. If you don't, we're not going to ask you to not continue being with us, but we're going to tell you that you're going to be missing out on so much more. If you do choose to look at the evidence and chew them, so to speak, and let them build more, now take it a step further and see if you can take a moment each day further and say, God, are you there? And just ask that question, but direct it toward Him intellectually and also in a mental sense, in a meditative sense. And what we're going to do is next week, we will look into further evidence. We will look into how did God reveal Himself. Some, as we have been saying, that could be through Jesus of Nazareth or Jesus the Christ. And we're going to look at that evidence. Is that true? Who is Jesus? What did Jesus do? What did Jesus come here to do? So we hope to see you next time. And as we say in Chaldean, Pusha Bishlama.